one, question C. So question C is going to ask a very similar type question. So if we go back to the problem, and now we look at question C, it says S is the function defined by S of x, but now notice it's S of x is f of x times g of x, and they want us to find it at S prime of 5. Now, you need to remember something. This is not what you do. S of x equals f prime of x times g prime, or g of x, okay? This is our function. This is a no. Do not do S prime of x is f prime of x times g prime of x. This is a no, okay? Because we have a rule for this. When you find the rule for things being multiplied, we have the product rule. It's the first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. You have to use the rule for anything that's being multiplied. So what we have is the first, which is f of x, times the derivative of the second, which is g prime of x, plus the second, g prime of x, times the derivative of the first, which is f prime of x. So now we have to go through and do some work to figure this out. That's where our calculator comes in again. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. First of all, let's get the g of x stuff, because g of x we know is from the table. So let's go back to the table and let's just find out what g prime of x is at, what was the number? They wanted to find this at s of what? S prime of 4. So we need to find f of 4. We need to find g prime of 4. Plus we need to find g of 4, and then we need to find f prime of 4. Okay, so the ones we can find quickly are g prime of 4. We go to the table. G prime of 4 is 1. So let's put that in there. And then we can also find g of 4. So if we go here, here's 4. G of 4, though, is 5. So let's put that in there. So we have 4 and 5. Now, this is where your calculator comes into play. You can't find the value. You could find these with more skills, but at this point, we don't have those. But we do have a calculator. So let's go back to our graph. The first thing is I want to find, this is the graph of the function. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to second calculate, and I'm just going to find the value of f of x at 4. And it says right here the value is 3.359. So it's going to be 3.359. That is the value at 4. But I can also use my calculator, second calculate. I can also find the derivative by using number 6, the derivative at 4. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put at x equals 4. And I find the derivative is 4.419. 4.419. So to find the answer, I need to multiply these out and add them up. So I'm going to get off the graph. So we're going to do second quit. And I'm just going to do some math. So 3.359 times 1 plus 5 times 4.419. And I hit enter. And I get s prime of 4 is equal to 25.454. Okay, so just so you know, this is also going to be worth 2 points. 1 point for the final answer, 1 point for showing that you understand how to do this. If you set that up and you at least get down to here, they would most likely give you a point for that. Okay, so you would, if you show them that, yes, I have to use the product rule, you would be good. Okay, so now let's do the last question. The last question is the same sort of thing. This is just a straight using the rules question. So if you take a look at this, they say t of x is f of x over g of x. So t of x is equal to f of x over g of x. But they want us to find t prime of 6. Now, you cannot say this. Do not say t prime of x equals f prime of x over g prime of x. This is a no, okay? No, do not do that. Remember, there's a rule. It's called the quotient rule, okay? The quotient rule tells us we have to take the low times the derivative of the high minus the high times the derivative of the low over the low squared, okay? So let's plug all of that stuff. The low is g of x. The derivative of the high is f prime of x minus the high, which is going to be f of x, times the derivative of the low, which is going to be g prime of x, all over g of x, but I have to remember to square it. Okay, so we are trying to find t of 6. So what that means is we're going to find g of 6 times f prime of 6 minus f of 6 times g prime of 6 all over g of 6, but I have to square it. Now, remember what we did in the previous problem. In the previous problem, the g of x stuff was simple to find because it's back here in the table. So let's plug all of those numbers in. So first thing I have is g of 6. So if I look at g of 6, it's 2. And then I still have to figure out what f prime of 6 is, minus f of 6, I don't know. But I do know g prime of 6. G prime of 6 is negative 3, all over g of 6, which is 2, squared. Okay? Now, the rest of it has to be done on our calculator. So let's go to our calculator. Let's go back to our graph. I need to first of all find f prime of 6 because that's the value that goes into that first space that I'm missing. So I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to go to second calculate, go down to number 6, and I want to find the f prime value at 6. So that's going to be negative 4.564. So it's going to be negative 4.564. Okay? Now, on this other part right here, I need f of 6. So I'm going to do the same thing, second calculate, except I'm going to find the value this time. So I'm going to use number 1. And I'm going to find the value at 6, and that's going to be negative 5.603. So it's going to be negative 5.603. Okay? Now I'm going to have my calculator do all the math. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So let's quit this, and we're going to do, remember, if the numerator should all be in one set of parentheses, so it's going to be 2 times negative 4.564. And then I'm going to subtract from that negative 5.603 times negative 3. And then I need to make sure I close the parentheses. So make sure I have the parenthesis here and here, so I closed it right there. And then I have to divide it by 2 squared, which is 4. So what I get is I get t prime of 6, right? It was t prime of 6 equals negative 6.484. So this one would also be worth 2 points. The 2 points would be, of course, the final answer, but you also would get a point for recognizing and using and applying this rule right here. If you recognize that this is the quotient rule and you use it, you would get 1 point for that, even if you made a calculation error somewhere in there. Okay? So this is how you do that first free response. The first free response was all about using all of the rules in a format that you haven't seen. So I need you all to start being very comfortable seeing things that you don't know and then making attempts at them using the rules and things that you have in your little toolbox. So good luck. Go through this problem and check it, and I hope you all have a better understanding of how to do this type of a free response.